The titles for the chapters and the titles of the sections, I'm under the impression that that's something that Helen and Ken and Bill came up with. Is that
The
consistent?
titles of the sections?
Yeah,
Oh, sure. Helen and Bill and Ken.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, they did all everything in this book.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought. So we're reading the chapter that they chose to call the final vision. Makes sense for the final chapter. And tonight we'll be doing the second section called Walking with Christ. I have some introductory remarks that will help us orient towards some of the material here. And so I'll just walk through these things. Think for a moment of the idea of a hierarchical relationship. It's one that emphasizes contrast and inequality. For example, the leader and their followers. They are unequal there. There's a hierarchy. So, and we see that in many places in this world. You even see it in families. Even among siblings, there can be an older brother who's all powerful, and the younger kids have to, he's got power over them. Hierarchies in relationships, inequalities. Well, the Course looks at that very deeply, and it says that you see yourself divided into different roles, which themselves are your own roles are conflicted. And then you project one of those roles onto another person. This is projecting part of your split mind outward onto others. This is where people come into denial. They say, oh, that's not me, that's them. And so you project the inequality within your own being in your thoughts. And so this emphasizes a belief in differences between yourself and another. And that takes many different forms, but it's always a difference. This is a fundamental error in relationships that obscures equality. The Course calls it an ancient lesson that you taught yourself. The idea of unequal relationships. And it turns out that within every one of us, there are, this echoes what we read over the weekend, there are two calls within each of us. One is to separate and one is to join. And the Course says, listen well, for the voice you hear in your brother is also your own voice. For your brother is asking what will come to you because you see an image of yourself in your brother. And the answer that you give your brother is the answer of what you're asking for. And so what you learn of another is what you learn about yourself. So in the Course, we try to heal this split, this interior split that has been projected outward onto people by recognizing that we can learn from our brothers. We can see the aspect of ourself that we have split off and projected outwards. We can see that in our brother and learn to accept that as part of ourselves. And this is part of the healing process. And then finally, this is kind of moving beyond towards the end of the healing. The goal of this journey is to decide to walk with your brother so that neither one of you is the leader or the follower, but you walk with him, metaphorically, hand in hand, as an equal, one with your brother. So those are some of the themes that will come up in tonight's reading. And David, if you're available to read tonight, we'll pick it up with the first paragraph.
An ancient lesson is not overcome by the opposing of the new and old. It is not vanquished that the truth be known, nor fought against to lose to truth's appeal. There is no battle that must be prepared, no time to be expended, and no plans that need be laid for bringing in the new. There is an ancient battle being waged against the truth, but truth does not respond. Who could be hurt in such a war unless he hurts himself? He has no enemy in truth, and can he be assailed by dreams?
It's an ancient battle, an ancient lesson. It goes way, way back. So it did not originate, although it might show up in your life and in your relationship, it did not originate there. It had its origins long ago. And in that battle, only one side wants to fight. Only the voice of the ego wants to struggle, as it says here, waging a war against the truth. But truth does not respond. And so this is consistent throughout the Course of Miracles. The character of the Holy Spirit's response is entirely different from what's coming in from the ego. And then this theme is not responding in kind, is also echoed in the workbook lesson, that in my defenselessness, my safety lies. I'm being attacked verbally or emotionally by someone else. And where is my safety lie? In my not wanting to defend, my defenselessness. So this is consistent with the Course. The truth will not fight back. And so what is the lesson we can apply to ourselves? When you feel that struggle with the ego, with your own ego, you should not attempt to fight it. It's not it wants to battle with you. The ego is more than happy to foster a battle. But if you are to heal, you must learn to relinquish it and just let it go, not to engage in warfare under its terms. Just dismiss it as invalid, unreal, unsubstantial. It's an effect without a true cause, and therefore can have no lasting effect in your life. Susie?
Yeah, I had a really interesting situation today. I had an ancient interpretation of somebody else's behavior, right? And I knew it was a judgment, and my ego was trying to get me to go to war. And you know what? I was driving in the car and I just said, you know what? I know what you're doing and I'm not listening to you. So you can just go the hell away. And it was amazing. I could just recognize, how I would be if I followed my ego and how I would be if I didn't. And I just said that. And I'm like, go away. And I just didn't attach myself to that thought system. And I really was laughing because that's all that it really, truly is. It's just that simple. But you know what, Tonica? I'm so glad that we've done the whole book, because I laughed also. I'm like, it's only taken me 31 chapters to actually say that to the ego. Like, just get away, go. I don't want you. So it just applies to what you're saying. And it was great, because then I was fine and peaceful and happy.
That's great, Susie. I identify what you're talking about there as the proper use of denial. You're saying no to the ego. I do not, the thought may be occurring to you and it may have feelings it stirs up, but you're making a choice to say no. And that is the proper use of denial, and it affirms it. We'll cover this a lot in chapter 2, probably in February. It's necessary for all of us to learn the proper use of denial, so that when we wander into those territories where the ego wants to stir things up, we are on our alert to say no to them. We don't invest our faith and power in them any longer, but we get out of there. So that's great. Thanks for that testimony. David?
Let us review again what seems to stand between you and the truth of what you are, for there are steps in its relinquishment. The first is a decision that you make, but afterwards the truth is given you. You would establish truth, and by your wish, you set two choices to be made each time you think you must decide on anything. Neither is true, nor are they different. Yet must we see them both before you can look past them to the one alternative that is a different choice, but not in dreams you made, that this might be obscured to you.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to walk through these steps here. That's the format they're using tonight. And what are we talking about? These are the steps to relinquish what stands between you and the truth, the obstacles. And it's not done in one. There are steps. And you can learn to do these steps so that they happen at the speed of thought, so that it can happen in seconds once you've learned them and you know how to navigate them. So the first one is actually in the form of the ordinary mistake, is you decide by yourself, thinking that you are the guide to truth. You would establish the truth. Now, we know from the rules of decision that this is the one thing you need to not do, is to make no decisions by yourself. But we should acknowledge that the common, ordinary habit of all egos is to think that you can figure out the truth on your own, and that therefore make your own choices. And that is always, we learned in the rules for decision, an unconscious choice to let the ego be your guide. Okay, so that's baseline beginning. Here it affirms that when you're doing that, the entire framing of the problem is now being done within a guilt, judgment, fear, anxiety, loss framework. And no matter what options appear to you, neither one is true, because you've defined it in terms of lack and loss and separation. So you think you must decide. Neither is true, nor are they different. The ego doesn't want to hear this. Of the choices that confront you, they really aren't different. They're illusion A or illusion B. And illusions are not different. They're all the same. So, but first we must see them both before you can look past them to the one alternative that is truly different. So remember, we said before, the fundamental teaching in this course is for you to make the distinction between what is false and what is true. And so here we see it yet again. In the ego state, the choices in front of your ego will be there. Both of them are false. Neither are true. But you've got to see them first. It says here, you must see them first before you can look past them to the one that is really different, to the truth. And this is my experience too. The ego always speaks first. That will occur to you right away. What is helpful is not to invest a great deal of time in examining the choices in front of your ego mind. Okay, so that's step one, is to I'll say ego speaks first, where you think you would establish the truth, and then you can look past it and realize, well, those are what my ego would say. This happened to me just very recently. I was very clear, was confronted with a situation, and my ego had it all mapped out up front, but I knew those things were coming from my little self. And that made room for me to acknowledge there must be another way of looking at this. David?
What you would choose between is not a choice and gives but the illusion it is free, for it will have one outcome either way. Thus, is it really not a choice at all? The leader and the follower emerge as separate roles, each seeming to possess advantages you would not want to lose. So in their fusion, there appears to be the hope of satisfaction and of peace. You see yourself divided into both these roles, forever split between the two. And every friend or enemy becomes a means to help you save yourself from this.
Mm-hmm. So the way this shows up, I know that you probably are already identifying, but the way this shows up in some kind of confrontation or conflict, particularly after you're able to step back and look at it, is it would either be somebody's right and somebody's wrong. She's wrong and I'm right. Or maybe even I'm wrong and she was right. It's two versions of the same story. I know many times when I've had to make a difficult decision, I wanted it to be a good choice for everybody involved. And I would examine it from the light of view, is this the morally and ethically fair, or is it unfair? So there's these choices that come around, and both of those thoughts ping pong back and forth within the mind. You can be aware of both your preferred point of view as well as the alternative point of view. What we learn as miracle students is these are not really choices at all. It's the illusion that you'd be better off if you chose one over the other. But we learn that I really do not understand what's in my own best interest. And that's a willingness to relinquish judgment and situations. You might be aware of the choices of the ego, but you can then move past that to say, I relinquish my own judgment so that I might make room for the guidance of Holy Spirit. So that's where we're going for. David?
Perhaps you call it love. Perhaps you think that it is murder justified at last. You hate the one you gave the leader's role when you would have it, and you hate as well his not assuming it at times. You want to let the follower in you arise and give away the role of leadership. And this is what you made your brother for, and learned to think that this his purpose is. Unless he serves it, he has not fulfilled the function that was given him by you. And thus he merits death, because he has no purpose and no usefulness to you.
Mm-hmm. So they use the language of leader follower in this section. That's one way of symbolizing it. But you could also symbolize it as one person is better than and the other person is less than. This isn't comparing people, right? This is the ego comparing people. One person's right and the other person's wrong, or all kinds of ways of expressing inequalities. And so whenever they say leader follower here, that's what they're implying. Two people, a relationship that are not equal to one another, and all the forms in which that could show up. And if you've ever obsessed for a long time with a problem, a struggle between you and someone else, you might realize that your mind can go through just about every possible thought. One minute you might call it love, the next minute you might call it murder justified. Feelings of disdain and hatred come up, feelings of understanding arise, and it says, this is what you made your brother for. And this is what you learn to think this purpose is, to struggle with you, to be the opposition. So all of this is about opposition, not cooperation. We're going to get to the healing at the end for sure. But we know that the ego state begins in a state of opposition. And so we made our brother for this, and he has no purpose and no usefulness to you unless he fulfills this purpose of opposition. So this is prime characterization of the ego outlook. David?
And what of him? What does he want of you? What could he want but what you want of him? Herein is life as easily as death. For what you choose as well for him. Two calls you make to him as he to you. Between these two is choice, because from them there is a different outcome. Mm-hmm. If he be the leader or the follower, to you it matters not, for you have chosen death. But if he calls for death or calls for life, for hate or for forgiveness and for help, is not the same in outcome. Mm-hmm. Hear the one, and you are separate from him and are lost. But hear the other, and you join with him, and in your answer is salvation found. The voice you hear in him is but your own. What does he ask you for? And listen well, for he is asking what will come to you, because you see an image of yourself and hear your voice requesting what you want.
Mm-hmm. This is deep here. This really bears pausing on. There are two calls. And that can be expressed as a call for life, a call for death. a call for forgiveness or a call for judgment, call for innocence or a call for guilt. Two very different calls. You will hear the call for death because the ego will persist. You will hear that call. And the key is to pause like Susie did and recognize that's the ego and deny your power going to that call. But the call, as we talked about last night, is not always contained precisely in the words that someone says. The call for life comes from their deeper self, from their heart and soul. And they may actually be yelling at you, but the Holy Spirit would view that as a call for help. So as a miracle worker, you can only detect this call for life when you're in your right mind. If you're all wrapped up in the ego and your armor and defense system and ready for battle, and let's let the stronger person win, you're not going to hear the call for life there, because the call for death is going to be occupy your attention too much and overwhelm you. You have to be in your right mind to recognize that within your brother, there is a call for life. And so it's a choice here now to hear the call for death or the call for life, the call for forgiveness or the call for judgment. And depending on which one you hear, that will have an effect. If you hear the one, you'll separate from him and you will be lost in that call of judgment. But if you hear the other, the call for life, you'll join with him. And in your answer is salvation found. And so this requires listening to your own soul. This is what prayer is about. This is what the pause, and I have to admit, or I wish to acknowledge, for me, this can take me days before I detect that. And I want to use an example that I struggled from years ago, but it was very poignant. So I was in an organization and I recruited someone to be the treasurer. And years into it, I thought he was taking the money, stealing the money from the organization. Okay, he would not be accountable. Well, how much money do we have? Well, oh, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. You know, it's very evasive there. And so I, for days and days and days, struggled with this judgment that I had until and prayed about it. I was very uncomfortable with it all. And only eventually, after days and days of prayer, did my judgment settle down, and instead of wanting to be right and wanting to be the judge, I was able to step back from that and see my brother, I'll call it the call for life, see all his service and his real intent. And it turned out he's just not strong in accounting. That's not his forte. It was never a bad intent. And so I'm just saying sometimes these steps can play out over longer periods of time. It's really nice when they can be resolved quickly, but you have to be willing to do the harder work when that's called for. Susie?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about kind of what you just said, and you just said he might he was not a strong accountant, right? So that's just an ability or not an ability in this world, a personality type, right? That I used to judge and hop all over, and but that's just all that is. Like, but in our higher selves, we're all equal, right? So it's like I shared over the weekend about the golden rule, right? And that's what I've been thinking so much about. Like, I don't want to be judged for whatever my personality type might be or my position in this world of time and space, you know? And so if that's true for me, then that's true for my brother. And that's what I've been thinking a lot about. And it's really been helping me a lot. It's my ego that wants to attack and judge, and you're not a good accountant or you stole the money, right? But that's really just stuff, noise. And it's really been hitting me like it's a miracle, right? Because it's a total change in perception, like thinking. And so it's really freeing. It's amazing to let go of the ego and the hold it wants to have. You know, I have a friend that has like in this world, right? ADD, and like it used to drive me nuts because, you know, I don't have that. But okay, big deal. That's what he has. Like, who cares? And it's so freeing to feel that way now and just whatever, you know. So I just wanted to share that because I've been thinking a lot about the differences in this world, but like, who cares?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Helped me so much.
Mm-hmm. So in my case there, an example, after days and days of prayer, and really, you know, I went through a troubled period by myself. It never came to words with the individual, but eventually I came around to see the goodness in the other person. And because you see an image of yourself and you hear your own voice requesting what you want from your brother, only eventually did that come around to that call. And it was the most wondrous healing to have gone from this troubled state I was in to a feeling, a sense of healing it was all worth it. Let's go on. David?
Before you answer, pause to think of this. The answer that I give my brother is what I am asking for. And what I learn of him is what I learn about myself. Then let us wait an instant and be still, forgetting everything we thought we heard, remembering how much we do not know. This brother neither leads nor follows us, but walks beside us on the self-same road. He is like us, as near or far away from what we want as we will let him be. We make no gains he does not make with us, and we fall back if he does not advance. Take not his hand in anger, but in love, for in his progress do you count your own. And we go separately along the way unless you keep him safely by your side.
That's the healing that we all long for. And so, however we regard our brother, we are learning of him what we will learn about ourselves. It says here, let us then wait an instant and be still. So just realize that that instant will take as much time as you need to get around to forgiveness and withdraw your judgment against the brother. For me, it took, I think it was about 10, this was years ago, I think it was about 10 days. I can still remember the angst, how troubled I was with it. But eventually, I came around to taking my brother's hand and joining in him, and that was so helpful. As it says here, we go separate. It could have gone the other way, I guess, if I had allowed my ego to lead in that situation. I could have gotten into a big confrontation, and who knows what would have happened. I don't even want to think about that. But we go separately along the way unless we keep our brother safely by our side. And so this is really the metaphor for the reading tonight, is in a hierarchy where there's somebody that's better than and somebody that's less than. We are not side by side. One stands accused, the other stands guilt. One's the accuser, the other's guilty, or however you frame that. All of that creates an opposition and an inequality. And what we're learning by pausing and being still and forgetting everything we thought we heard from the original call and remembering how much we don't know, that makes room for the call to life to come in, where, and Susie was speaking to this, where all those things that we thought mattered so much really don't matter at all if someone doesn't know how to do accounting. For instance, in my case, they don't matter. It's not what is the most critical factor in the situation. What matters is the way we relate ourselves to ourselves and the way we relate to others. So keeping him safely by our side. Go ahead, Jane.
I remembered this experience I had when I was like 22 years old, and I worked in California for Wells Fargo. There was a program called JET, which is Job Education and Training. And it was for people who, maybe didn't go to college and they really wanted to learn. And there was a gentleman on the teller line who just couldn't get the teller. He never could balance, and people, other managers and stuff would get so mad at him. And I would just work with him because he was like 70 years old, an African-American man, beautiful. And nobody wanted to really help him. And so I did. And then I got turned in to the headquarters for doing that. And I had to go to this meeting, and they asked me, why would I do that? He shouldn't be eligible for this program and all this. And I just said to them, you know what? I have to put myself in his shoes because I could be there too. And it's important that if we're going to have this program, that we manifest it. Otherwise, there's no point in having it. Why bring people in to frustrate them when we're not going to help them? And I got so ridiculed, but it was so great. I didn't have the course then either, but it was so wonderful because I just thought to myself, I can do this in love. I don't have to do it in judgment. And I didn't even know the course then, but it makes me realize now just how judgmental people are. I never used to think they were, but I do now. And I have to make sure that I refrain from my judgment. That's the most important thing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. I'm so glad you shared that, Jane, because you said a couple times, I did not have the Course in Miracles then. And it says in the Course in Miracles that everyone has heard the voice of the Holy Spirit. And I think what you just shared was an example of where you were hearing the voice of the Holy Spirit. It's not because you were reading A Course in Miracles. It's because you wanted to reach out and care about this other human being and give them every opportunity. those impulses come from the Holy Spirit. And so in your own way, you might identify it as coming from your heart or from your soul. You were hearing the voice of the Holy Spirit.
And the other thing is, I wasn't afraid. I mean, I was on this big management program, and the manager called me and told me they want to see all this, and I wasn't afraid. And he said, "You're in the toughest branch of the whole Wells Fargo system, and we put you there because we knew you could handle it." And I said, "Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do." And he was just so surprised. And he said, "You might be taken out of that branch." And I said, "Everything can be a blessing," because I wasn't afraid. I just wasn't afraid. Whether I knew in my heart that this man was just so loving, and he was striving so hard to get his kids through college and stuff. And I didn't care if I got kicked out of the bank or not. I really didn't. But you know why? I didn't have any fear then, because fear would have stopped me right away. It would have said, "Oh, I better not go after this one. I'll lose my job." So for me, it was really not really, it's probably the only time in my life I've ever done it, but I just had no fear whatsoever. Thank you.
Yeah. So the choice then is, with regard to the individual you're engaged with in any situation, whether you go separately along the way or keep him safely by your side. There we go, David.
Because he is your equal in God's love, you will be saved from all appearances and answer to the Christ who calls to you. Be still and listen. Think not ancient thoughts. Forget the dismal lessons that you learned about this Son of God who calls to you. Christ calls to all with equal tenderness, seeing no leaders and no followers, and hearing but one answer to them all. Because he hears one voice, he cannot hear a different answer from the one he gave when God appointed him his only Son.
Well, I'm just seeing so many dots connected here, because Jane just shared that story where she had a job with Wells Fargo, and maybe they would get rid of her for taking this action to help this man. She was answering the higher call within her and was not afraid of the outward details of the situation, the hierarchy of the bank being her employer and her being employee. She didn't get lost in all that, do whatever you have to do to keep your job. Instead, she was listening to the higher call within her. And so it says here, Christ calls to all with equal tenderness, seeing no leaders and no followers, and hearing but one answer to them all. So, and I really believe that every human being has the capacity to hear that voice, that call. Not saying they will act on it. It's still a choice of whether you act on that call or not. But every human being, if they're willing to listen, can hear that call. Well, it says here, Christ calls to all with equal tenderness, where there are no leaders and no followers, and has one answer to them all. David?
Be very still an instant. Come without all thought of what you ever learned before, and put aside all images you made. The old will fall away before the new without your opposition or intent. There will be no attack upon the things you thought were precious and in need of care. There will be no assault upon your wish to hear a call that never has been made. Nothing will hurt you in this holy place, to which you come to listen silently and learn the truth of what you really want. No more than this will you be asked to learn. But as you hear it, you will understand you need but come away without the thoughts you did not want and that were never true.
Be very still an instant. So this is the key to listening to the call for life, is to not get overwhelmed by the voice of the ego. Here it says, come without all thought of what you ever learned before, and put those images aside, and they will fade away before the new. So in this learning journey, this is where we're headed, is to be able to set aside those voices of inequality, a voice of judgment and of guilt, and learn not to feed on that, not to give it power, not to place our faith there. And Susie was illustrating that, and she said the thought occurred to her, but she was resisting it. She was not wanting to endorse it. And so this is part of the art of making a distinction between what is false and what is true. And your denial of what is false is vital for you, because that frees your will and your attention so that you can give your power to what is true. And Susie, this is an art. This is an art, because when it happens, it feels like you're in the midst of a struggle, a battle, and you have to have learning. You have to be paying enough attention to what's going on within your own being to recognize the feelings that are coming up and realize at least you can say, I don't like the way this feels. Perhaps I was mistaken in my first thought. And then, but I'd rather be mistaken and be happy than continue with the mistake and feel all torn up within. Heidi?
Yeah, first, I love how Susie shared earlier. She recognized her ego thought. And I think it was Marianne Williamson when she was talking about weight loss. You know, you have a picture of this, like the big bad wolf is your hunger telling you you're hungry, but you're really not. And I actually have given my ego a face. So when I see this, big bad wolf face, I know that it's my ego. And I've been able to do the same thing a few different times this week. So it's really so beautiful when we're able to finally do that. But the other thing that I wanted to say is this sentence, nothing will hurt you in this holy place to which you come to listen silently and learn the truth of what you really want, is one of the most beautiful sentences I've heard.
Isn't it?
I mean, it's like, wow, I want to live in that sentence.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing will hurt you. And it's just so amazing that I can put the big bad wolf aside and know that I can go to that holy place. This is really beautiful. It's a great paragraph.
Yeah, thank you for emphasizing that, because it is the Course says again and again, where is our safety? It's not out in the ever-changing, constantly being perceived and redefined and reinterpreted situation. Our safety is in this inner place. And I really believe that's where you join with your brother first. You accept him, using language modern day, in your heart. You make room for him in your being to accept him there. And then you can express that on the outer plane. And so in this holy place, you're where we listen silently and learn of truth, that's where our safety lies. And accessing that is the essence of accepting the atonement for yourself, is being able to access that place within you. It's already there. You just have to be clear out enough of the obstacles to renew your connection with it once again. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, Heidi. David?
Forgive your brother all appearances that are but ancient lessons you have taught yourself about the sinfulness in you. Hear but his call for mercy and release from all the fearful images he holds of what he is and of what you must be. He is afraid to walk with you and thinks perhaps a bit behind, a bit ahead would be a safer place for him to be. Can you make progress if you think the same, advancing only when he would step back and falling back when he would go ahead? For so do you forget the journey's goal, which is but to decide to walk with him, so neither leads nor follows. Thus it is a way you go together, not alone. And in this choice is learning's outcome changed, for Christ has been reborn to both of you.
Beautiful. So it does say that perhaps, so this is, let's picture for this a minute, someone who's miracle-minded and someone who's not. And it does acknowledge that your brother is afraid to walk with you and thinks perhaps that he's either should be the leader or the follower. It would be safer. And so this is the role of the miracle worker, is to be in your right mind so you can offer this invitation that comes from deep within you. It's that call to be equal to your brother, so that, as it says here, don't forget what this journey is real, this journey through life is really about. Don't forget the goal. The goal is to decide to walk with your brother. And so getting clear within yourself that that is your purpose, to be helpful, to heal, and to help others heal. Once you're clear on that, Spirit will speak through you in ways that will express your intention with your brother, who may not be yet on that same page, but it's an invitation. Yeah, I'm going to leave the reborn part alone for right now, because we probably get to that again and again later. Susie?
You know, I just love Jane's story, and it's just about being kind, right? And Jane was that man's miracle worker then. You know, I remember I used to go to a lot of Al-Anon meetings, and there was this man there, and you know, he probably had some kind of little learning disability or whatever, and he would go on and share, you know, for like endless amounts of minutes. And most people would be sighing and this and that, and oh my God, Ron is such a pain. And I remember sitting there looking at him and having like compassion for him and saying, okay, well, first of all, my lesson is to be patient and tolerant, and you know, and I remember going up to him one day and saying, it's okay, Ron, like that's how you speak, because he started apologizing for himself or whatever. And I had a very similar situation. It wasn't like that, like the hierarchy at work, you know, or I was afraid of getting whatever, but it was just, I remember thinking, just having so much like compassion for him, or, you know, not judgment. And it was like a moment for me, like, oh, this isn't, you know, this is who this person is. So it's kind of what we're saying. It's just really just judge not and just always be kind. And then the Holy Spirit will speak through me and I'll do the right thing if, you know, if I'm miracle minded and right minded. And you know what, Jane? I think that like Spirit helps us, right? So when you do that, when we do the right thing and we show up for others and we're kind and we're generous, we're taken care of, you know. Like I can't imagine that you would lose your job for something like that, you know, in the spirit world, you know. I don't know, it's a beautiful story, and it's a just everybody deserves to be treated equally. And this line reminds me of this guy, Ron, who's probably thought he has to walk behind, you know, and right. And he doesn't. And as miracle workers, that's what we have to do, right? Let everybody know that they're equal and we walk together. And that one sentence, take my hand, take his hand in anger and not in love, to me is the entire course. You know, it's beautiful. So thanks.
That is so beautiful. The course says that the way you know that you have learned the course is that there is no fear in another with you. And that is just so beautiful to think that I just feel so good when I know that I haven't made somebody feel fearful or less than. I think the biggest situation in this world is less than somebody's, and it just makes you just feel, you know, kind of joyful inside that people don't fear you. Thank you, Susie.
Well, I'm going to take a little risk here and share about our group, because it was actually Julie C. from Virginia. We were doing coffee over Zoom once, and talking about the group meeting. And, you know, we get a lot of different people in the group here. And Susie, like just with your friend Ron, he might feel himself less than. And so people will come into the group here and maybe feel less than, like I brand new, I don't know all these Course in Miracle terms, I haven't read 31 chapters or all, and you know, they'll do that to themselves. And Julie was expressing how she just really appreciated that there's room around the table for everybody. You don't have to come in with all your P's and Q's in the right place and everything and all now. Some people might think they need to, but that there's room around the table for people to come in wherever they are. And so it's just a realization that this less than, greater than dynamic plays out in our world, but we can set a standard here that gives that of no importance. And I would have it no other way. Heidi?
I can totally relate to that because I remember when I first joined this group, I was asking 5 million questions and I felt so far away from all of you that I almost stopped coming because I felt like I just felt like I was being judged as a newcomer. And I guess it goes back to I finally realized that nothing will hurt me, that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I'm so grateful that all of you allowed me to feel a part of you and held my hand together, not as leaders, but made me feel a part of. And I've experienced this exactly firsthand in this group, which is so amazing. And I'm just so blessed. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, glad that happened. That was a miracle. David?
An instant spent without your old ideas of who your great companion is and what he should be asking for will be enough to let this happen. And you will perceive his purpose is the same as yours. He asks for what you want and needs the same as you. It takes perhaps a different form in him, but it is not the form you answer to. He asks and you receive, for you have come with but one purpose, that you learn you love your brother with a brother's love. And as a brother, must his father be the same as yours, as he is like yourself in truth.
It's amazing, often what we're talking about is addressed in the next paragraph. And so what we're just talking about is the group, and people come in, and it says here that a person takes perhaps a different form in him. Like Susie was saying, Ron's way of communicating had a different form. But it is not the form you answer to. That is not the purpose. And the purpose is to be able to learn you love your brother with a brother's love. And when that purpose is held in whatever way it's verbalized, but that's the intent, is to bring about healing and open the gates of love, then the forms that people show, they get demoted. It's not saying you don't notice them, but they have no meaning any longer. And instead, the purpose that draws us all together becomes most prominent. And that's where the healing happens, when we draw together around a common purpose. And so I think this is just what we were talking about. You will perceive his purpose is the same as yours. He asks for what you want, which is to be loved and to be held and cared for, and for other people to acknowledge that deeper calling within each one of us. David?
Together is your joint inheritance remembered and accepted by you both. Alone, it is denied to both of you. Is it not clear that while you still insist on leading or on following, you think you walk alone with no one by your side? This is the road to nowhere, for the light cannot be given while you walk alone, and so you cannot see which way you go. And thus there is confusion and a sense of endless doubting as you stagger back and forward in the darkness and alone. Yet these are but appearances of what the journey is and how it must be made. For next to you is one who holds the light before you, so that every step is made in certainty and sureness of the road. A blindfold can indeed obscure your sight, but cannot make the way itself grow dark. And he who travels with you has the light.
So there's a couple layers here. So one is the concept or the idea of our joint inheritance, that our inheritance from the Creator of our being, of our eternal nature, and of our perfection in light and love is inherited. We jointly inherit that. You cannot see yourself as having it and them not having it, because the very judgment that they don't have it blocks your awareness from the purity of that awareness. It's a joint inheritance, remembered and accepted by you both. Alone, it is denied to both of you, and it's not clear. So that's a beautiful concept. You can only truly know your divine inheritance jointly and in joining and together. It encompasses all living things. And then I at first didn't decode it. For next to you is one who holds the light before you. So I have to think that based on what it said before, it says, for Christ has been reborn to both of you, that we're talking about the inner Christ. So they use metaphors as if it were in the physical world, as if there was a body standing next to you holding the light. But we know that that's but a metaphor. Next to you is one who holds the light before you, so that every step is made in certainty and sureness of the road. Yeah, this was referring to that idea that was expressed earlier about there's this safety that you have in your inner altar, where your spirit being is acknowledged and recognized. There's a safety there that brings about a certainty and sureness of the road. And Jane expressed that she had no fear, even though these managers might have wanted a different action taken here. She had no fear. She knew she was hearing the higher call from within. And so there was a certainty and a sureness of the road. Yeah. It's really amazing. And those outward effects, these are but the appearances of what the journey is and how it must be made. So it's about an awareness of your inner being and your purpose for being here, and a trusting in that above all things, and not being distracted by the forms and the noise that comes from calls of the ego. So a couple comments, David.
You know, I've been taking the course for quite some time in my mind's eye. And, you know, we go over these things and we talk about how the course says the same thing over and over in many different ways. And, you know, for some reason, this particular readings tonight really has gotten to me inside. I don't know why, but it's opened my heart in some way. You know, one of my favorite groups is the Talking Heads. And I was almost going to sing this thing. It said, "This is the road to nowhere." And, you know, this idea of walking alone. And all my life, I've walked alone, or so it's felt. And you could have knocked me out with a feather if you would have said, I said, "Oh, yeah, someday I'm going to say that I understand that Christ has been reborn in me and both of us, with me and my brother." That's a very, very moving, emotional thing for me. And for me to come to here, to this space, is a miracle. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that, David. That's precious. Susie, do you want to comment? I would suggest maybe
Well,
just let
yeah,
David's comment stand by itself.
yeah, no, I was gonna say I don't really feel like following that comment, but it was beautiful. Maybe we're all crying, but what I was gonna say, I don't know if Heather is listening or you know, but when you were talking, when Jane was talking about no fear, it reminds me of her Target story when we were talking all about justice that time, and she went out to help that woman who was shoplifting and you know, to help her, and she had no fear. Are you here, Heather?
Yeah, she's there.
Yeah. She had no fear. I mean, I remember the story vividly. It just was beautiful. And she said, I remember her saying she just was guided by the Holy Spirit, right? And had no fear. So Heather, right? And so it just really reminds me of, like, she was just sitting in Target, like, you know how we say we don't go to Target for coffee? Like, her higher purpose was to help this woman. And it just is beautiful, really.
It's a special place. We have to learn to access it on a regular basis. Kathy?
Yeah, thanks. I think for me tonight, I made a mistake yesterday. I sent an email I shouldn't have sent. But then I asked God, what do I do now? Do I apologize? What do I do? I was uncertain, and I did have fear about how to resolve it. It relates to my HOA, and I've gotten myself in a position where I feel like I'm the only one fighting for financial, like something that makes sense financially for insurance expense. It's our biggest expenditure. And I didn't get involved last year. I was too involved in other things. And I feel like I made a mistake by not getting more involved last year. So I'm involved for the last 5 months. And the truth has been coming out from some of the board members that recently resigned about, like, really a breach of fiduciary duty. And I felt like when I came to this realization over the last few months of what had happened last April, how the insurance went double and now it's going to go triple. It's going to be $700,000 a year. No one is being accountable for this and getting quotes and doing what is logical. And I was a controller, okay? So this whole thing is just madness to me. So I sent an email I shouldn't have sent. And I asked God, what do I do? Do I apologize? And the answer that I got, and I've been praying all day about this, is no, you don't have to apologize, but keep going. So I called the property management company and I explained on the voicemail to the controller, because I was a controller for property management. So I said, look, hey, I know what's going on. And I didn't get a call back, but I probably will later this week. But I got a nasty email back from the email I sent yesterday from the president of the board. And I'm not going to react. And I didn't even read the whole thing. But I guess my point is sometimes, you know, like I've gotten myself in this uncertain situation. Normally I have lots of certainty and lots of faith and everything. And I do have faith in this. It's just that I'm in unknown territory, and there's all this anger and a lot of financial liability for the association. And I don't know, I know it's not that important, that part of it. The part that's important is what you've talked about in the meeting tonight about walking next to my brother hand in hand. And that gives me such peace. And I know that's what's important in all of this. So I just want to say thank you. And it brings me back to sanity, you know. So, but it was a crazy day. I knew I made a mistake, but God said it'll be okay, you know. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, well, that's as far as we're going to read tonight. I just wanted to say thank you all for being part of this thing we do, of growing and acknowledging and testifying to our fears and our barriers. This is an amazing experience. We're really gifted and blessed to have this period in our lives where we're come together and open and growing together. This is the most important thing in my life. And we're all, and every one of you are vital members of that. So thank you. For me, that's what Thanksgiving's all about. It's about coming together and recognizing and acknowledging the blessings that we have. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
We will connect again next weekend.
Do we have to go?
Yeah.
No, we can hang on. We can hang on.
I have to go. Love you all. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
Love you.
Thanksgiving.
Happy
Thank you. Happy
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Give a big hug to you all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Love you guys.
Love
Thanks,
you
Deb.
guys. Thank you,
Thank you
David.
all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, David.